Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we're doing another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings, some injury updates, some GM and coaching updates, including around Chicago and the Islanders as they found their new coach and their new GM. And we've also got a couple of trade rumors involving the Senators, the Sabres, the Jackets, and a couple of other teams. We'll go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we're going to start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. Now in today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. We're going to start off as we usually do. We're talking about some signings from our past few days. We're looking at 7 signings today that happened just a couple of weeks back and still not completely caught up on the signings, but we're getting closer, so bear with me. We've got 7 signings here to talk about. 4 were contract extensions, 3 were new ELCs, so we'll touch on all the ELCs first. As first, the Canucks have signed one of their top-end prospects. That's 20-year-old right-shot defenseman, former first-round pick, 11th overall back in the 2023 draft, and that is Tom Wallander. Wallander gets a 3-year ELC with AV of $950,000, had a very fantastic year over in the NCAA. There was a lot of talk that the Canucks were not going to be able to work out a contract extension with Wallander, but he has indeed signed. So it's a very good pickup there for the Canucks. The San Jose Sharks have signed right shot defensive prospect, 21-year-old, second-round pick back in the 2022 draft, 45th overall. Matthias Havelid to a 3-year ELC with AV of $905,000. Havelid this year played over, I think it was in the SHL, might have been Hockey Allsvenskan. Had a pretty good season over there. Eventually he's going to be a decent third, maybe second pair defenseman. So it's a pretty good ELC sign there for the Sharks to get Havelid. Then we saw New Jersey Devils give an ELC out to one of their top prospects, and that's 20-year-old right winger, second-round pick, 58th overall back in the 2023 draft, Lenny Hamina-Aho to a 3-year ELC with AV of $950,000 that began at the start of next year. Hamina-Aho looks like a very fantastic wingward prospect. I think eventually should be a solid top 9 guy for the New Jersey Devils, so probably won't be next year, probably will need a couple of years of development time, but eventually that could be a really good top 9 addition there for the Devils. So the Devils give Hamina-Aho an ELC, Sharks gave Havelid an ELC, and the Canucks gave Wallander an ELC. And then we saw 4 other contract extensions. First in Philadelphia, the Flyers have sent 29-year-old depth player Rodrigo Abols to a 1-year contract extension with an AV of $800,000. Abols had 2 goals and 5 points in 22 games at the NHL level last year. Was basically a call-up option. Played most of his season over in the AHL, but still, Abols looks like a very fantastic call-up option. So 1 year, $800,000. That's a variable contract. That's not too bad in my opinion for the Flyers. They also gave a 1-year, $800,000 extension to Oscar Eklund. Eklund is a 26-year-old winger. Did not play the NHL level this year, was primarily an AHL player. Once again, it's a guy who I think could be a call-up option if it came down to it, so that's an interesting sign there for the Flyers, but the Flyers have given Eklund as well as Abols extensions in the Philadelphia Flyers organization. Then we saw New Jersey Devils sign 24-year-old restricted free agent Nathan Laguerre, who was in the final year of his deal, to a 1-year contract extension with an AV of league minimum. Laguerre got into 3 NHL games this year, putting up no points, was mostly AHL level guy, so I think Laguerre is mostly an AHL player but can be a call-up option, so 1-year league minimum, that's not a bad contract there for the Devils, and they keep Laguerre around. And then the biggest of these signings from the past few days is in Tampa, as they have extended Jonas Johansson to a 2-year contract extension. Johansson gets a 2-year extension with an AV of $1.25 million. He will remain Tampa-based backup. In my last video, I think it was a couple of videos ago, we talked about the offseason preview for Tampa, and I said it could probably go after a new backup. Well, they've obviously said that Johansson's good enough and they're going to keep him around. He played 19 games this past year, had 3.13 GAA, 895 save percentage. Just not great numbers, but they aren't overly atrocious either. So Johansson sent a 2-year deal, just over $1 million, and he will remain in the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. So we saw 3 LCs, 3 lower end AHL players get extensions, and then we saw Johansson Johansson remain the backup in Tampa, so there's a lot of interesting signings from the past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So when it comes to injury updates, not too many injury updates to talk about here at this point. First, in Edmonton, Mattias Ekholm was not available for Game 1 of the Western Conference Final. We were expecting this. Ekholm probably will be available later on into the series, but he's not available for Game 1 for the Edmonton Oilers. Well, Connor Brown was able to play in Game 1 of the Western Conference Final after missing the practice earlier in the day. So Brown was a question mark, but he did want to get into game action in Game 1 for the Edmonton Oilers, but Mattias Ekholm, like everyone was expecting, was not available for the Edmonton Oilers. Carolina's Jalen Chatfield remains out day-to-day with undisclosed injury and missed Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Final due to it. So Chatfield, who has been out since the late stages of round 2, is still injured. So it's a battle there for the Hurricanes. Seth Jarvis left Game 2 with an injury, was good to go for Game 3, so it's really good to see that the Carolina Hurricanes did not miss Seth Jarvis due to his injury. Well, Sean Walker, who left Game 2 with an undisclosed injury, did miss Game 3 due to it. So the Carolina Hurricanes back end was definitely hurting on Saturday as Walker and Chatfield both missed game action. Well, Seth Jarvis was good to go. So very interesting injury updates there from our past couple of days, as the Canes and Oilers had Brown and Jarvis play in their most recent games, but Ekholm, Walker, and Chatfield continue to deal with injuries, so interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of coaching and GM updates. We saw a lot of interesting updates from the past couple days that I wanted to touch on here today. So it starts with the coaching stuff here. The biggest piece of the coaching news is with Chicago, as the Blackhawks have officially hired their new head coach. You know, they fired Luke Richardson in season. They didn't like the way it was going. They promoted Anders Sorensen to interim head coach, but even though he did a lot better and that power play was doing really good under him, they didn't want to continue to go with Sorensen beyond last year. So they wound up going for a full head coaching search, and they wound up picking Jeff Blashill as their new head coach. That's a little bit surprising. There was a lot of speculation out there that Blashill would probably be the new head coach in Chicago. His tenure didn't really end well in Detroit. He was with the Detroit Red Wings as their head coach for most of their tenure as they started to go through their rebuild. So very interesting stuff there, but Blashill will be the new head coach. It's a little bit of a head scratcher in my opinion. I think there were probably better options for the Blackhawks, but if they feel like Blashill's second opportunity as a head coach could go way better than his first, maybe it could be a good hire there for the Blackhawks. So interesting note there. They have also hired Michael Pekka, who was a part of the New York Rangers coaching staff, to be an assistant coach to Blashill, so that's an interesting note there. They have parted ways with former assistant coach Dean, and Sorensen will stay on the staff member as an assistant or as associate head coach in some role. So interesting note there, but Blashill's new head coach in Chicago. Pekka joins them as an assistant. Dean is out as an assistant, and Sorensen will stay on the Blackhawks staff. So interesting note there. When it comes to the Bruins coaching options, they have apparently been interviewing Mitch Love, Luke Richardson, and Jay Leach for the vacant coaching position in their organization. Mitch Love has been a part of Spencer Carberry's staff in Washington and looks like maybe one of the young and up-and-coming coaches in the NHL. Jay Leach has been in the Boston Bruins organization as an assistant over the past couple of years, and they could try and promote him to be the new head coach. And Luke Richardson, like we just talked about, the past couple of years with the Blackhawks head coach, also had head coaching experience in Montreal. So interesting note there, no guarantees, but it sounds like the Bruins are sort of starting to narrow down their field on who they could potentially hire as their new head coach. And Love, Richardson, and Leach are all interviewed by the Boston Bruins. Seattle, meanwhile, for their vacant head coaching position, has interviewed also Mitch Love, who we just talked about, one of the Capitals assistants. Looks like an up-and-coming head coach at the NHL level. So Love has also been interviewed by the Seattle Kraken, as well as Lane Lambert and David Quinn. We talked about Quinn, I think it was with the Pittsburgh job. He coached before in San Jose in the New York Rangers organization. And Lane Lambert had a short stint as the head coach of the New York Islanders organization last year, was I think some sort of a coach in the Toronto Maple Leafs staff. So very interesting note there, but Love, Lambert, and Quinn have all been linked to the Seattle Kraken, and any one of those three could want to be the new head coach for the Seattle Kraken. When it comes to the GM options, the New York Islanders did get permission back a little while ago to interview Brendan Shanahan to potentially be like a GM or president of hockey ops. Didn't go anywhere, and later on Shanahan was announced to be let go by the Toronto Maple Leafs. So very interesting stuff there, but the Leafs will not be bringing back Shanahan, and he'll have to look for opportunities elsewhere, but he's not going to be brought back in NYI, as they have officially made their move on their new GM position. Matthew Darche is going to be the new GM in the New York Islanders organization. I love that addition there for the New York Islanders. I think Darche, he's been interviewing over the past couple of years for GM positions. He looks like he's going to be a very good GM at the NHL level. He was a part of the Bolts GM staff when they've been doing all these great moves over the past couple of years, winning the Cups. So Darche, I think, is going to be a really good pickup there for the Islanders as the new GM. I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air from Lou Lamoriello, and I think the Islanders fans are going to be in good hands with Matthew Darche, and I think that's a really solid add. So Bergeron's going to stay in Los Angeles as an advisor. He was one of the finalists too. Shanahan's not going to have to look for opportunities elsewhere because the Islanders not only hired Darche as their GM, but basically as the president of hockey ops too. Basically, he's going to look over everything for the New York Islanders. So very interesting note there, but Darche is the new GM in the New York Islanders organization. Going back to coaching really quickly here, Brad Shaw, who we talked about in our last video, is going to be leaving Philadelphia. Well, it sounds like he's going to be joining the New Jersey Devils coaching staff as an assistant coach. So very interesting note there. We talked about earlier in the offseason how the Devils moved off of some of their assistant coaches. So it seems like Brad Shaw, who was the interim head coach for Philadelphia, didn't get the coaching job, wasn't going to be brought back with the Philadelphia Flyers organization, is now heading to New Jersey. So interesting note there. And then just lastly, a couple of player updates. Ivan Prosvetov, who left the NHL a couple of years back, been playing over in the KHL, wants to come back to the NHL. So it seems like Prosvetov has basically finished up his time in the KHL and wants to have another stint in the NHL. He played for Colorado and Arizona over the past number of years before he went to the KHL. So we'll have to wait and see. But Prosvetov, I think, could be a decent contender for a backup position at the NHL level. Well, when it comes to Shabanov, he's one of the top European prospects in this year's European transfer thing. It sounds like the Knights and the Penguins both have very much interest in trying to bring in Shabanov and probably like a one-year ELC. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But Shabanov, who has been a really good prospect, I think over in the KHL, is drawing interest from Vegas and Pittsburgh to come over to the NHL. So lots of interesting updates on the past couple days, but it sounds like Prosvetov wants to come back to the NHL. Shabanov could go to Pittsburgh or Vegas as one of the top European prospects. The Shaw is going to be joining the New Jersey Devils coaching staff. The Bruins and Kraken have been linked to 3 interesting people as their new potential head coaching options. The Hawks have hired Blashill to be their new head coach, and the Islanders have hired Darche to be their new GM. So very interesting updates from our past couple of days. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. We've got a couple of things to talk about here. So first, just going over to a couple of just little things here. I saw a couple of articles, not from actual NHL insiders, but just a couple of people who were releasing some articles talking about 2 interesting things. One was where Boeser could go and what could be some of the more likely landing spots of Brock Boeser. And the second one was who could the Detroit Red Wings target in free agency to help on their blue line. Now, if you look at Brock Boeser, the 3 teams that were linked to him in this article were the Los Angeles Kings, Minnesota Wild, and Carolina Hurricanes. Now, if you look at the Hurricanes in the conference final right now, you can definitely see it. This team could definitely use a goal scorer. They're going to have cap space to make some moves this offseason. So I would not be one bit surprised. They were linked to Brock Boeser at the trade deadline. I definitely think if they could pony up the asking price that he's probably going to want, like an $8 to $9 million AAV, I think that Boeser would be a smart fit there for the Carolina Hurricanes. We know Boeser and Minnesota have been linked for quite some time. I think Boeser has connections to Minnesota. I think he's from there. So Boeser going back to Minnesota would be a very interesting thing. Once again, the Wild are tied up against the cap, so it'd have to maybe like a pay cut or something, but it seems like Boeser in Minnesota might be a good fit. And Los Angeles is a little bit more confusing because they do have a lot of really good forwards, but given the fact they just got eliminated again by Edmonton, you gotta think they're going to be making some very bold moves this offseason. So maybe going after Boeser would be the move that the LA Kings really need to make. So interesting note there, but this article linked LA, Minnesota, and Carolina to Brock Boeser. There's a couple of other teams who I think could go after Boeser too, but I think Minnesota, Carolina, they definitely make sense. Los Angeles a little bit less, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on if you think those 3 teams make sense for Brock Boeser. Next, going over to Detroit. When it comes to Detroit, I saw an article talking about 3 UFA defensemen they could target this offseason to try and bolster their defense. We know that this defense needs some help. They got Hull, they got Sherratt, they had Petrie before he's going to hit the free agent market this year, who are just too old of defensemen on too bad of contracts. They're playing too high in the lineup. This team needs some really solid top 4 defensemen. Now, this article linked Orlov, Gavrikov, and Klingberg as potential options for Detroit to target in free agency. Now, I can see Gavrikov, like he's a really good defenseman, would really work well in that top 4. I'm not sure if he'll leave Los Angeles, but I definitely could see that sort of a deal happen. happening. Maybe like a 4 to 5 year deal at like $7-ish million would be a smart move there for Detroit. Orlov, I think, is a little bit on the older side. I'm not sure if he'd be the best fit, but he is a really solid top 4 defenseman, so I could definitely see a fit there. I don't really see a fit with Klingberg. He's more of a third pair guy, having a really good season over in Edmonton after all of his injury troubles, but still, I'm not exactly sure if Klingberg would be the best fit in Detroit. So I'll have to wait and see on that, but this article linked Detroit to Orlov, Klingberg, and Gavrikov as potential trade targets for them, and I could see Gavrikov and maybe to some extent Orlov, but I really don't see Klingberg. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Next, going over to the Ottawa Senators, according to Bruce Garriott, he was recently talking about the Ottawa Senators and says that the Senators are sort of seeing if it makes sense to try and go after a trade target in Rasmus Ristolainen for their defensive problems. Now, we've talked about how the Ottawa Senators might be looking for a right shot defensive defenseman. Apparently, Rasmus Ristolainen, according to Bruce Garriott, is someone the Senators could try and target. I don't think Ristolainen's the best fit for Ottawa. Personally, in my opinion, I think Ristolainen, he's a good guy. He fits quite well in the Philadelphia Flyers system. Like, I think Philadelphia and Ristolainen are a really good fit. I don't think he'd be the best in Ottawa. Like, I think he'd be more of a third pair guy. Ottawa needs a second pair guy. I don't think he'd fit overly well with a guy like Thomas Chabot or Jake Sanderson in the top 4. So I could see why Ottawa has some interest. Ristolainen started to turn into a really decent top 4 defenseman in Philadelphia. I just don't see the fit. Maybe you guys do. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts if you think that's sort of a good fit. What do you think Ottawa would have to give up for Ristolainen? Like, I think it would be like a second-round pick and maybe one of their better prospects. I don't think they should probably pony up any more of an asking price than that, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and if you think it makes sense for Ottawa to go after Ristolainen. Next, going over to the Buffalo Sabres, Elliotte Friedman on one of his recent podcasts was talking about this and said that the Buffalo Sabres are gauging the trade market for Bowen Byram. So it definitely sounds like Byram is on the trade block for the Buffalo Sabres. There's been no official announcements that Byram's asked for a trade, but it just seems like the Sabres are trying to figure out what they could do with Byram. Like, he's probably going to want $7 to $8 million on a new deal. I do not believe the Sabres want to pay 3 defensemen, Power, Dahlin, and then Byram over $8 million. So if they could move him, I think it would make sense. If they could get some forward help, maybe a lower end defenseman who could be a little bit cheaper, maybe someone on the right side, I think that'll be a smart move there for Buffalo. Maybe get picks and prospects. Like, I'm not exactly sure what they could try and target, but I think Byram's going to be one of the top players in this year's trade market. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee Byram gets moved. It's definitely a possibility that Byram could stay in Buffalo. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But I think at this point in time, the way it sits right now, it definitely seems like Buffalo is gauging the market for Byram, and we could be seeing a Bowen Byram trade at some point this offseason. And I think any team who could use some more top 4 help, like a Calgary or a San Jose, Chicago, like some of those up-and-coming teams, I think could definitely use a younger guy like a Byram. Anaheim would be another. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but Elliotte Friedman does say the Buffalo Sabres are gauging the trade market on Bowen Byram, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And the last thing we're going to talk about here is the Columbus Blue Jackets. According to Don Waddell, who told Mark Sheeg of the Hockey Writers, he was talking to Don Waddell, and Waddell told him that both of his first-round picks for this upcoming draft are on the table and they'd be open to moving. Now, we know the Jackets barely missed out on the playoffs this year. They were 2 points out of passing Montreal and New Jersey for a playoff spot in this year's playoffs. They barely missed out. And the Jackets know they're very close to being a playoff contender in the Eastern Conference. A couple of moves, and they're going to be a really scary team to face. They have a lot of really good young players. You can insulate that with a couple of veterans. That's going to be a very scary team to face for a long time. Now, with that in mind, it seems that the Jackets are open to moving their first-round picks. They currently have the 14th overall pick, which is their own, and the 20th overall pick, which is Minnesota's. So because of the David Jiricek deal, they got the Wild's first-round pick. They also got their own first-round pick, so they have 2 top 20 first-round picks. Now, I'm not sure if they'll trade both of them. I think there's a very likely chance they'll move off one and they'll keep the other. I think they could definitely still use some more prospects in their system. But I definitely, with the way that it's shaped up right now, I can see why they would move a first-round pick. Like, you move a first-round pick for maybe someone who can fit in the top 6, someone who can fit in the top 4. Not exactly sure who they could try and target, but you move one of those guys for something like that. I think that'll be a very smart move there for the Jackets, and I think it could definitely help them out. So we're going to have to wait and see that. Once again, not a guarantee by any means the Jackets move either of their first round picks, but Don Waddell has mentioned now that they are open to moving their first round picks for the right deal. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think the Jackets move their first round picks? And if so, who could they move it to and for what? Do you think that Buffalo moves Byram? And if so, who tries to acquire Byram and what could the Sabres get back in return? Do you think the Sens acquire Ristolainen? And if so, what sort of a return do you think Philly could get? Do you think Detroit goes after Orlov, Klingberg, or Gavrikov in this year's free agency? And could you see Boeser go to Carolina, Minnesota, or Los Angeles? Definitely your thoughts on all of that. Plus the coaching updates, the GM updates, the few player updates, the signings, and the injury updates from our past couple of days. Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're not, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. It really helps upload the channel. I'm around the road to 500 subscribers. I also do a blog to make news, rumors, analysis. If that's want to check that out, I'll link that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.